Hi, I'm James DeFreitas with Ask Mr. Greenthumb, and today we're at Sunken Gardens in St. Petersburg, and we're going to look at a lot of interesting stuff that they have on display here.
Some of the most beautiful plants in the area, and we're going to let you be privy to their beauty.
Come grow with Stan and James DeFreitas on the Ask Mr. Greenthumb show. With a multitude of popular plant information, learn how to identify, grow, nourish, and explore the wonderful world of green lush gardens. We hope to enlighten your senses with new ways to plant healthy greenery. You too can get the Greenthumb blessing. Come grow with Stan and James DeFreitas on the Ask Mr. Greenthumb show.
Again, we're at Sunken Gardens here, and they have a lot of interesting stuff going on. And one of the things that you don't see a whole lot of is the palm that's behind us.
And this is a fishtail palm. It's a Caryoptomitis is the Latin name for it. And it's one of those palms that's unusual. It's relatively new here. They have not had it here in the past. This beautiful palm tree from Africa is really unusual because the leaves resemble that of a fishtail, don't you think?
Sure looks like it, yeah.
It's got that cutout looking leaf, and it's very unusual. And it's also variegated, which I think is one that I've not seen before. But the fishtail palm makes a nice addition, kind of a specimen looking plant. Wouldn't you add that into like a focal point in your landscape?
I certainly would, and it looks like it's got some kind of interesting, the base looks kind of unique too compared to other palm trees. It's got some kind of wrapping or something around it. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, just some of the bark, and it's just unusual in the way it's coming out.
Okay.
I think the fishtail palm is one that certainly we don't see much in the cool areas because it's not cold hardy, but in areas of like Florida and further south, it's been actually kind of adapted to those areas and sort of naturalized, if you will. So it's a great looking palm, and one that we're glad that folks get to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus the other thing that's interesting with palms in general is that unlike normal trees, when you cut them in half, they don't have a traditional type of system inside. They're, I think you'd call them vascular bundles.
Right. It looks like a bunch of straws, right?
Exactly.
And so it's different than a dicot. And in fact, when they come up with one seed leaf as a monocot, which is all the grass families and palms. And the other, of course, we think of oaks and things being dicots with the two seed leaves or beans. But the monocots actually are the bigger family of the two, which I think a lot of folks wouldn't think of because so many of our ornamentals are dicot type plants. But monocots are beautiful, and the palms and grasses in general, I think, just add a lot to our landscape.
Right, and the other thing that I think is neat is that when you come to places in your local community gardens, it's nice to see different things that you don't normally see in your landscape, and this certainly fits the bill for that. Yeah,
being at Sunken Gardens, which is a publicly owned place, it's nice that they preserved a little bit of history and also a botanical type gardens that you really can see a lot of great looking plants at.
Exactly.
The bird of paradise is one of the more commonly used plants for its beauty. But this happens to be a pine-leafed bird of paradise, and that's kind of unusual. You don't see that in every garden. The Strelitzia reginea is one that has usually real strapped-looking leaves, but in this case, it's very thin and unusual looking. That's the reason we decided to show it to you. Now the flower has that typical bird of paradise look. It looks like a bird in flight with its orange and blue colors. Bird of paradise is like a lot of organic matter, so add a lot of peat and a lot of extra cow manure and add a lot of extra compost to your planting site, and you'll have a lot better results. The other plant we might look at would be this little white variegated bougainvillea. We've talked about bougainvilleas before, and normally we think of them in the real vivid purples and pinks. But the bougainvillea also comes in this variegation in the leaf, but also has a white looking sepal, or some people might describe it as the flower. It's really not a flower, as we've said before, but bougainvilleas like a lot of extra organic matter, though they do like it hot and they like it dry. It's not going to be one that's going to take very much cold or cool weather, so if it goes below 32 degrees, you're either going to have to put it back in a container and protect it, or in some areas where it's just going to near freezing, you can sometimes cover it over to make a good effect.
So it looks like we've got an interesting low-lying bush type of hedge plant here.
We do, and I think it makes a nice effect, don't you?
It does. I like the, it's got a nice yellowish green leaf to it. But one of the things I noticed in a lot of these is you've got some darker green leaves that are popping out. And is that just the new growth?
Yeah, it's got some older growth and new growth. The newer growth is going to be a little more yellow. It's called Golden Mound.
Golden Mound. Okay.
And it's really nice. Yeah, it's got some new growth coming out. Actually, the newer growth is probably more of a golden yellow color, which has got the Golden Mound name. And then as the growth gets a little bit older, it'll probably darken up just a tad as it gets more food for the plant. But I think it's a nice layering effect that we have here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now what's going on here with this particular leaf here? I'm kind of picking it off here, and I don't know if the camera person or the folks at home can see what we're doing here.
That's a little bit of a fungus.
So it's just kind of a fungus going on.
You see
here.
a little spot in there like that.
So
now,
it's these little black, and is this an overwatering issue, or is this a...
probably older leaf, and yes, fungus can get in there. Fungus is among us. You know, fungus is always there. And yeah, you get a little bit of fungus. Not enough to be a real problem, but I don't think you'd have to break out any fungicidal sprays.
Okay.
But if it progressed further, then you might have to.
You might, depending on how bad this gets.
And of course, it's one of those plants that likes a good deal of moisture, but if you like a good deal of moisture, it means you also like a good deal of moisture for fungal problems.
Right.
And so that can occur.
Gotcha. So yeah, so anytime watering happens, you know, it's a friend and foe.
And this plant likes it moist. It probably likes it more moist than many, so you probably want to add a lot of organic matter when you plant it, and probably have an irrigation head or hose nearby.
Gotcha. Now, when you're feeding this plant, low on the first number, on the NP and K?
Yeah, I'd probably just give it a general fertilizer, probably a couple times a year.
Okay.
And it can vary, but you know, some NP and K.
Yeah. And I had to ask him what that meant. So
nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which every fertilizer has.
And he likes it because it makes him seem smart, which is always a good thing.
Which is true, but we want to make sure people learn a few things. And
Sure.
NP and K is on every fertilizer. It's always first number is N, second number is phosphorus, and third number is potassium. And it'll always be that. It could be 666, could be 10-10-10, could be any ratio of those numbers.
Sure.
And but it's important, and a lot of people forget to fertilize. They go, well, the plant looks pretty good. Well, the time to fertilize is kind of like before you start seeing a lot of problems.
Right.
So
yeah.
do it on your calendar. Mark, you know, spring, summer, and fall normally. Depending, you don't want to push a lot of growth right before cool times. So a lot of times during the fall, winter, people use a lower first number.
Gotcha.
Higher in phosphorus and potassium, or they'll skip the fertilizer.
That makes sense.
got-
So what's going on here? I see that we've got this, now I'm going to refer to this as in a comic fashion as the Shaquille O'Neal plant,
Yeah.
but you're telling me that's not its actual name.
It's a chenille plant.
chenille, okay.
It's actually an acalypha is the Latin part of the name.
An
Acalypha.
Okay, then we'll let you say that.
But chenille is common. If you want to call it a chenille
Okay.
O'Neal, that works pretty well too. You can see it's pretty tall, so like chenille, it's a big tall.
So you're going to have a lot of space for when, you know, you need to think about what this plant is going to become, not what you get it in a little small pot.
Well, you could keep it trimmed, but
Okay.
here, of course, where we've got a large space to fill, we've got lower, medium, and tall. They've kind of let it just kind of grow taller. And they want to see those beautiful little chenille flowers.
Sure.
And kind of reminds of the old days, long before your time and mine, many bedspreads had chenilles on them.
Okay.
And that's where it
That's
got
where
its,
it got its
That's
name.
where it got its name.
All righty, that's interesting too. Now, to me, and I assume there's no relation to it whatsoever, but this down, I don't know what you call that. Is that part of the flower?
It's a flower.
Okay, so that thing that's hanging down here, the flower, it looks a lot to me like a bottle brush, but this is probably not related at all.
It's
Okay.
not, but it's actually related to the copper plant. You've seen the
Copper
copper
plant.
plant has the copper-looking leaves.
Okay.
It's in the same family as that.
Okay.
And it has almost the same color as far as it looks. Almost the color of the copper plant looks a little bit more like our plants we have next to it, which are the red dracaenas or Thai plants.
Sure.
And,
well, just a super plant because it's so unusual, and I always like to see unusual stuff being used, and I think the audience would like seeing that too. The really bright yellow plant above us. Now, what do we got going on here?
Now that is a Mexican sunflower,
Okay.
and you don't see it all the time. We see the traditional sunflowers, There's over 32,000 different members of the composite family.
That's
and
a
that
lot.
Covers that whole sunflower group.
And you're an expert in every one of those.
Well, no, you could spend your whole life probably just in that one family.
I bet.
But
well,
you
it's
can
sure
see
making the bees happy up there.
the bees and the monarch butterflies just think it's Meals on Wheels.
Well, it's beautiful, and I can see where it's a nice, colorful plant to use in a multi-tiered garden setting like this one. So
You can see. James, we've got a really beautiful area here for kids and butterflies.
Well, it sure looks really nice over here. You're telling me these are weeds?
Well, a weed is just a plant out of place. This is called milkweed.
Okay.
And it does kind of grow gangly, but it's got these beautiful orange-red flowers, and monarchs just think it's Meals on Wheels.
Okay, well, hamburger helper for them, huh?
It's beautiful. We've got a lot of other flowering plants here.
Why do they call it milkweed? Let's start with that.
Well, if you break the stem, it would have a little milk that would come from it.
Well, you think they'd get upset if I broke the stem?
Oh, you probably could break a small one without anybody being too hacked off. You sometimes will see like a little milk on the end of it.
Oh yeah, right there. I don't know if you can get that or not, but yeah, it's right there. It's kind of almost looks like Elmer's glue or something.
Kind of like truth in advertising.
Yeah, okay.
Now the milkweed is one that monarchs in particular just really like to use as a nectar plant. It has a delicious nectar to them, and they'll often lay their eggs on it, but also they'll go back sometime and lay their eggs on that pipe vine along the wall there that's covering that wall.
Another weed.
Well, it's pipe vine.
Okay, so it's actually a vine, not a weed.
It's sometimes called
My apologies.
Dutchman's pipe. It has like a pipe-looking flower. This pipe vine is one that makes a nice covering over the wall, and it's sometimes called the Dutchman's pipe vine because it looks like a Dutchman's old pipe, if you will.
Okay, interesting.
So it's a conversation piece. If you want something that people will come to your landscape and look at and go, oh my gosh, that's unusual. They've never seen a Dutchman's pipe before.
Sure.
So it makes a conversation piece, and it also is a nice place that has those big, large green leaves where the little caterpillar can get underneath and lay their eggs. I should say the caterpillar doesn't, but the butterfly does, and then that'll turn into the eggs, and then we get into the chewer, the caterpillar, and then eventually the whole cycle.
Sure, just this different cycle of the butterfly. And it looks like we've got another interesting tree here. I guess this is a tree rather than a plant.
It's one of the acacias,
Okay.
and they're sticky wickets.
Yeah,
Now,
I just touched it a second ago, and I thought maybe I was taking a diabetic test here because it kind of gave me a little prick on the finger.
Well, it's an interesting plant. It's a Legumiaceae family.
Okay.
And, so it looks like a bean-looking leaf.
So that's a fancy way of saying legume.
Legume in a pod.
Right.
And it's one of the ones that you'd say from Africa that has all these thorns, and it keeps some of the critters from eating it.
Gotcha. So if I was a giraffe, I would just think this thing is great.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a problem. With their big
Okay.
old leathery tongue, they go, yeah, thorns, that's just good roughage.
Gotcha. Well, my fingers certainly didn't care for it too much, but yeah, it's a neat looking kind of thing. I mean, something I haven't seen before, and I guess that's one of the reasons why Sunken Gardens here would carry something that's unusual. So I think that's kind of a neat thing. And I see that we've got the bee there, which hopefully he stays right there.
We've got bees, and we've also got butterflies, and that's the beauty of having a garden like this. We've got some pentas. Now, as a youngster, one time you took a piece off a pentas and sat very, very patiently.
Oh, I remember this.
And a hummingbird came up and took the nectar out of the flower while you held it. And I say that because most young children wouldn't have the patience.
My arm was tired. It was definitely 20 minutes of just sitting there going, I hope that he eventually comes to this particular penta.
You know, and I had a camera then too, but unlike what we have today, which is state-of-the-art cameras, my camera, I sat there and tried to get the shot, and I got it, but it wasn't what I wanted.
Well, nowadays things have changed so much. But anyways, a lot of beautiful plants here, and what else are we going to look at today?
Well, there's all kinds of beauty around us, flowers in every direction, so we'll just take a walk and see what else we can find.
Fantastic. And it looks like we have another interesting plant behind us here. I've never seen one quite this large. What do we got?
It's a staghorn, and yeah, you're right, James. I don't think I've ever seen one any bigger than this.
It's pretty interesting. Now, what makes it unique to other plants?
Well, there again, it's an epiphyte, and we've said that word before, epiphyte just meaning an air plant.
Okay.
And so it can grow on often on the base of a trunk. Sometimes people will build like a little wooden platform, a little sphagnum moss. In fact, I think you helped me build one.
I did.
Many moons ago.
Like a hexagon shape.
And it was huge. That was a big, probably a big 5x5 footer. And so you can do that, or you can be real simple and just put a little bit of sphagnum moss, attach it to the trunk, a little bit of fishing wire. You can get real elaborate like you did, or you can get real simple.
Yeah, and I see this one is being supported by a huge chain above it. And if you're going to have it in this setting, you want to make sure that you use a really thick chain. And the other thing, I think, because of the weight involved, you want to be checking that chain probably on a 6 months yearly basis. You would not want this thing coming down on a small child or an animal or pet.
That's a good safety tip that people should remember. It's a lot of weight, it's a lot of girth. You start getting something that's 6 or 7 feet across and that high, it inherently has a lot of weight to it. Now, a lot of people like to cut up banana peels, and because there's some potassium and magnesium and a little bit of nitrogen, and they'll put it in between the base of it and let it feed it. And you know, in nature, often the epiphytes will attract insects and stuff, and as they die, because they sometimes get trapped there, then they break down and the whole cycle recycles again.
That makes sense. Well, it seems like a really interesting conversation piece to have in your backyard, the Staghorn Fern.
Good plant.
What is it?
It's called a sugar palm.
Okay.
And it is unusual. I've never seen one before. Sugar palms are used for sugar.
Okay, so they actually mill it for sugar?
They sometimes call it a wine palm, because if you can make sugar,
You can make alcohol.
you make alcohol. So it's used in, so many other parts of the world. Palms had to be really used for every part of them, from building to making sugar, for food. And this is an unusual one that I had not seen, so I thought we wanted our audience to see something that I hadn't seen, and I thought I have seen a bunch of different kind of plants.
Well, it's certainly interesting, although what I'm noticing on this particular is it doesn't have that many buds coming off of it.
I think because it's in so much shade, it's hard to build up enough energy. If it were in more sunlight, it would probably get more fronds. Right now it's on a 3 bean a day diet, so it's a bit, a problem for it.
Yeah, this palm here has a really long leaf on it. It must be, I don't know, 10, 15, what do you think?
I'm guessing at least 15 feet.
Yeah, pretty interesting. And so you're saying this is quite unique. You don't see a lot of these plants.
No, I mean, you see other palms, but I've never seen a sugar palm in the States. Now, I'm sure they're out there in arboretums and things, but I would imagine also it probably doesn't take the cold real well. So it's probably also going to be protected more so.
Okay, so it's going to need to be maybe closer to a home, up a place where it can, get more warmth. And another interesting plant that we have behind the sugar palm is this very odd-shaped flower. What is it?
Well, it's called the chalice vine, and you can imagine why.
Well, it's got a nice shape to it. Looks just like a chalice, although I don't think I'm going to be putting any alcohol in it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be drinking from it, but it has an unusual shape, and it's one of those specimen plants that people go, wow, that's a conversation piece, because you just don't see it very often.
Yeah, no, I've never seen one before ever, so this is kind of unique, but working on a show like this, it's every week for me.
And that's cool because it has gets to be tall. You see this one's probably, what, 15, 20 feet tall?
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Now it does need a structure to grow upon, so you're going to have to give it some space and maybe build a little something for it so it has its area to grow upon. And remember, it gets its blooms on the ends or on the terminal growth. So don't trim it too much or you'll be looking at very pretty green leafy vines.
Yeah, and we don't want that. And this one obviously is doing quite well where it's at. So it looks like it does pretty well in somewhat a shady spot.
Somewhat shady. Probably flowers best where it's getting a little bit of light. It's got a kind of that filtered light in here where light is getting through, and also somewhat protected. They're not real cold hardy. So for folks in cooler areas, you're probably going to need a greenhouse or something to kind of protect it. But
okay, so definitely this is more of a tropical type of deal.
it is.
Okay.
But so a lot of folks, even in our northern venue, sometimes like to have specimen plants that other folks can't see, and this is one they might want to add to their collection.
Sure, and it's a beautiful one to have, and it's the chalice vine.
Yep.
And I sure like it when a plant kind of gives us a slight indication of what its name might be.
Yes, it's the angel's trumpet, or it looks like a bell almost, the way the flower is. So often it's used in the landscape because it's unusual.
Sure.
And it has a nice little fragrance at night, very fragrant.
Okay.
And it's unusual. Now it's in the Solanaceae family, so it's kind of a third cousin to the tomato and the potato.
Okay.
And even some parts of those can be toxic to some people too.
So this is something you can't, this is look at it, enjoy it for its beauty, but don't think of eating it.
Don't eat it, and be especially careful for young children, or if you've got dogs that like to chew on things, this plant could be lethal.
Could be a problem.
And so make sure that that's something that you're aware of. Now, azaleas everybody has. If you ate enough of them, they could be toxic too.
Right.
So dose makes the poison. But some animals like to chew on everything, and this is one that could be a serious problem. That being said, this one here is about 20 feet long. I've never seen an angel's trumpet this big.
Well, it certainly is beautiful. It's got a nice peach color, and I did notice how high off the ground it is. I mean, it's hard to get an idea of how tall it is here because we are in an interesting setting, but it's actually quite tall off the ground.
Yeah, they'll get to be about 20 feet tall, and they can spread about 20 feet as well.
Okay, so once again, this is a type of plant tree that you need to think about what it's going to be, not the size that you get it in the little 1 gallon or 2 gallon pot. You need to think about the spread, and you're going to need a fairly decent amount of size in your yard for this type of tree or plant.
That's a good point to bring up, because a lot of people put something and go, it's pretty, and then we don't realize that it wants to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so unless you've got that 20 feet dedicated to it, you'll be trimming it. And of course, if you trim it, you get your flowers on the terminal growth like you do on so many plants. So you don't want to be trimming too much, or you won't be getting the kind of blooms that you're looking for.
Okay, well, there you go. Maybe it's another type of wonderful tree to give to your neighbor so you can enjoy it without the work.
True.
The angel trumpet.